Few people know that Dallas Jenkins once worked as a janitor at his father's company, sweeping floors while dreaming of Hollywood success that seemed perpetually out of reach. This man, who would later create the most watched faith-based series in history, spent years watching his projects crumble before they even began. How does a filmmaker's greatest failures become the foundation for unprecedented success? Can divine intervention truly transform a career built on rejection and disappointment? The answer lies in surrender, when Jenkins stopped fighting for worldly recognition and began serving something greater than himself. Divine timing operates on schedules that defy human logic, turning professional disasters into spiritual preparations. If you enjoy content that helps you grow spiritually, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and join our community for more inspiration. Let's get started. In 2017, Jenkins found himself directing what appeared to be glorified church videos for Harvest Bible Chapel in Elgin, Illinois. The megachurch, drawing 12,000 worshippers weekly, needed short films for their elaborate Easter and Christmas services. 8 Easter celebrations over 2 days, each hosting 2,000 attendees, required content that could capture biblical truths in mere minutes. Jenkins accepted this humble assignment after watching multiple studio doors slam shut on his ambitious projects. The irony was profound. Hollywood had deemed him unworthy, yet here he was, crafting stories about the most important figure in human history. These weren't million-dollar productions with A-list actors and cutting-edge technology. They were intimate portraits of Jesus, filmed with borrowed equipment and volunteer actors, created for a local congregation that simply wanted to encounter Christ in a fresh way. Unknown to Jenkins, these modest church films were becoming his masterclass in storytelling authenticity. Without the pressure of box office returns or studio executives breathing down his neck, he discovered freedom to explore Jesus' humanity alongside his divinity. The constraints of limited budgets and tight deadlines forced him to focus on emotional truth rather than spectacular effects. As Jenkins later reflected, God uses the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. 1 Corinthians 1:27. His professional failures hadn't been roadblocks, they had been preparation. Every rejected script, every cancelled meeting, every door that closed was clearing a path towards something unprecedented. When VidAngel discovered Jenkins's short film, The Shepherd, and suggested expanding it into a series, the filmmaker faced a radical choice. He could pursue traditional studio backing, which had repeatedly failed him, or trust an untested crowdfunding model that would put the project directly into the hands of ordinary believers worldwide. Jenkins chose faith over fear, launching a campaign that would shatter every record for fan-supported entertainment. Families contributed lunch money, teachers donated classroom funds, and small business owners invested life savings into a vision that promised to show Jesus as someone relatable, approachable, and gloriously human. Meanwhile, 3,000 miles away in Los Angeles, Jonathan Roumie was living a nightmare that would make most actors abandon their dreams entirely. The Lebanese-Irish performer had spent 2 decades chasing roles that barely paid rent, surviving on voiceover work for video games like Fallout 4 and Mafia 3, while watching younger actors land the parts he desperately needed. His apartment in the city of broken dreams had become a prison of unpaid bills and mounting desperation. But sometimes, when we're at our lowest point, that's precisely when divine intervention breaks through our darkest moments. Jonathan's story proves that surrender isn't defeat, it's the doorway to miraculous transformation. This is exactly what The Secret of Jesus' Apparitions offers, a path to clarity and peace through his revelations. This ebook goes into his prophecies and offers insight into what lies ahead. It's available for free in the pinned comment. Grab it now before the audition's gone. Government assistance had been his lifeline, but even that safety net was disappearing. Roumie faced the harsh reality that at 43 years old, his acting career might be nothing more than an expensive delusion. The man who would soon portray the Prince of Peace was drowning in anxiety, checking his bank account obsessively and calculating how many days he could survive on rice and beans. I literally said, "God, take this from me. It's in your hands now," Roumie confessed during a moment of complete spiritual collapse in his cramped studio apartment. This wasn't theatrical dramatics, it was authentic surrender from a man who had exhausted every human option. He fell to his knees on worn carpet, tears streaming down his face, and released his grip on a career that had brought him nothing but heartache. The surrender was absolute. Roumie stopped checking casting websites, ceased networking at industry events, and began preparing for a life outside entertainment. But in that moment of spiritual emptiness, something profound shifted. As Scripture promises, "The Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves the crushed in spirit." Psalm 34:18. Divine timing was about to intersect with human desperation in ways Roumie could never imagine. 3 months later, his phone rang with an opportunity that defied every statistical probability in Hollywood. Dallas Jenkins needed an actor for a short film called The Two Thieves, and Roumie's name had surfaced through connections he'd forgotten existed. The role was tiny, 5 lines as a repentant criminal, but it would place him directly in Jenkins's path at the exact moment when casting decisions for a revolutionary Jesus series were being made. Roumie's Catholic faith, nurtured through years of daily mass attendance and rosary prayers, had prepared him for this encounter in ways he was only beginning to understand. His spiritual discipline hadn't been mere religious routine. It had been training for the role of a lifetime. The Texas heat was merciless as construction crews worked around the clock to birth something unprecedented, a complete first-century village rising from the scorched earth near Camp Hoblitzell. Stone by carefully placed stone, artisans crafted narrow streets that would have been familiar to ancient feet. Adobe houses sprouted from the landscape with meticulous attention to historical detail, their rough-hewn walls bearing the authentic scars of manual craftsmanship. When filming began on this extraordinary set, something shifted in the atmosphere that defied rational explanation. Camera operators with decades of experience noticed it first, an unusual stillness that settled over the production like an invisible blanket. The typical chaos of film sets, filled with shouted directions and mechanical noise, gave way to moments of profound quiet that seemed to emerge from nowhere. During the Sermon on the Mount sequence, hundreds of extras dressed in hand-woven tunics gathered on a hillside that could have been transplanted from ancient Galilee. The sun blazed overhead as Jonathan Roumie, now fully embodying Jesus, stepped forward to deliver words that had echoed through 2 millennia. "You have heard that it was said, 'Eye for eye and tooth for tooth.' But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also." What happened next left the entire crew speechless. A tangible presence seemed to descend upon the set, as if the very air had become charged with something sacred. Roumie later described feeling completely overtaken, as though he was no longer acting but channeling something far beyond his human capabilities. "It was as if time stopped," he recalled, his voice breaking with emotion. "I felt like I was standing on holy ground." Just as Jonathan's breakthrough came after surrender, you can unlock the divine timing waiting for your life. The same principles that transformed his career are available now. Don't wait. Only a handful of copies remain in the first pinned comment. The transformation wasn't limited to the lead actor. a seasoned lighting technician, a 30-year veteran of Hollywood productions, found his hands trembling as he watched the scene unfold. "I'm not religious," he admitted quietly to a colleague, "but something was happening out there that I can't explain." Equipment malfunctioned in ways that suggested supernatural intervention rather than technical failure. Lights flickered without electrical cause, and a mysterious breeze swept across the set during a healing scene, providing relief from the oppressive heat despite the absence of wind machines. Even the extras, many of them local volunteers without acting experience, reported extraordinary experiences. A college student from nearby Austin vividly dreamed of Jesus calming a storm on the Sea of Galilee the night before filming a scene she knew nothing about, only to discover the next morning that this exact sequence was scheduled for that day. Behind the cameras, longtime producers Chad Gunderson and Chris Doohan were documenting events that challenged everything they knew about film production. Gunderson, a veteran of faith-based projects including the National Bible Bee game show, found himself witnessing what he could only describe as divine intervention during Season 2's lake sequence. A thick fog had blanketed the water for hours, making filming impossible as cast and crew waited helplessly on the shoreline. "We sat there for what felt like eternity," Gunderson recalled, watching equipment being packed away as daylight faded. Several crew members had already reached their vehicles, resigned to another lost day of production. The scene required perfect timing with Peter and Andrew in a boat, surrounded by complex water choreography that couldn't be rushed or improvised. Then, in a moment that defied meteorological explanation, the fog didn't gradually lift. It vanished instantly, as if someone had pulled an invisible curtain. "I looked across the lake and it was just gone," Gunderson said, still marveling at the memory. What should have been impossible timing became flawless execution as the actors delivered a performance that captured not just the scripted dialogue, but something deeper, more authentic than any rehearsal could have produced. The divine timing extended beyond weather phenomena. Chris Doohan, with 2 decades of high-end visual effects experience from projects like Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, faced an insurmountable challenge during the miraculous catch of fish sequence. The sophisticated digital effects required to fill fishing nets with hundreds of realistic fish typically demanded months of preparation. But Doohan had only 4 days to solve what seemed impossible. After exhausting every conventional approach, Doohan and Gunderson found themselves praying desperately for a breakthrough. The next morning, Doohan received a phone call that would become part of The Chosen's growing collection of unexplained interventions. The visual effects supervisor had awakened at 3 a.m. with a complete solution downloaded into his consciousness. Technical details that shouldn't have been accessible to him in sleep. The most extraordinary occurrence involved a 14-minute continuous shot opening Episode 3 of Season 2. This ambitious owner required actors, camera operators, and dozens of extras to execute a complex choreographed sequence without a single mistake. After 2 failed attempts, one ruined by forgotten lines, another by visible camera shadows, darkness was approaching rapidly. On their final attempt, every element aligned with supernatural precision. As the last word was spoken and the final gesture completed, the sun touched the horizon, creating a natural lighting effect that no cinematographer could have planned. Director Dallas Jenkins stood speechless, tears forming as he realized they had captured something that transcended filmmaking technique. The miraculous timing that saved The Chosen scenes wasn't coincidence. It was divine orchestration. When you align with God's perfect timing, impossible becomes possible. Time is running out to claim your copy. Very few left in the first pinned comment. Not everyone celebrated these accounts of divine intervention. Religious critics emerged from conservative circles, questioning whether The Chosen's humanized portrayal of Jesus crossed theological boundaries. Pastor Marcus Thornfield of Covenant Reformed Church in Georgia published a scathing blog post that went viral across evangelical social media. "This Jesus laughs too much, cries too often, and seems more like your neighbor than the King of Kings. Are we witnessing entertainment or heresy disguised as inspiration?" The controversy intensified when skeptics began dissecting the reported miracles with surgical precision. Social media platforms buzzed with accusations that the supernatural accounts were elaborate marketing ploys designed to manipulate religious audiences. Twitter user Ashon Film Fact Checker wrote, "Convenient how these miracles always happen on Christian film sets. Show me the same phenomena on secular productions. Then we'll talk divine intervention." Jonathan Roumie found himself at the center of heated debates about his Catholic faith influencing his interpretation of Jesus. Protestant viewers questioned whether his emphasis on Marian devotion and sacramental practices created a version of Christ that favored one denomination over others. "He prays the rosary daily and attends Latin Mass," wrote one forum commentator. "How can he represent a universal Jesus when his spirituality is so specifically Catholic?" Roumie responded with characteristic humility and unwavering conviction. "My faith doesn't make me more worthy to play Jesus. It makes me more aware of how unworthy I am. But that unworthiness, that broken humanity, is exactly what connects me to the role. Christ came for the broken, not the perfect." Yet beyond the theological debates and skeptical analysis, something undeniable was happening in living rooms, churches, and hearts across the globe. Letters poured into The Chosen's offices from viewers whose lives had been fundamentally altered by watching the series. Maria Santos from Sao Paulo wrote through tears, "I lost my teenage daughter in a car accident and hadn't spoken to God in 3 years. When I saw Jesus weeping for Lazarus, I felt permission to grieve again." In Cairo, Ahmed Hassan, a Muslim university student, confessed to friends that watching The Chosen had transformed his understanding of Christian faith. "I don't believe Jesus is God, but this series showed me a man worth following. His compassion transcends religious boundaries." Meanwhile, in Stockholm, atheist professor Dr. Erik Lindqvist admitted to colleagues that the series had forced him to reconsider questions he thought he'd permanently answered. "There's something in Roumie's eyes that suggests he's accessing truth I can't easily dismiss." The global reach amplified these transformative encounters. As Isaiah 55:11 promises, "So is my word that goes out from my mouth. It will not return to me empty, but will accomplish what I desire and achieve the purpose for which I sent it." While critics debated, millions were quietly transformed by something greater than entertainment. The same power is ready to work in your circumstances today. Secure your free copy from the first pinned comment before they're gone. Availability extremely limited. 5 years after that first crowdfunding campaign, The Chosen had shattered every conceivable barrier between faith-based content and mainstream entertainment. With over 408 million episode views spanning 190 countries and translations into 58 languages, the series achieved what Hollywood executives deemed impossible: global cultural impact without studio backing or celebrity endorsements. The revolutionary pay-it-forward model allowed viewers in wealthy nations to sponsor access for audiences in developing countries, creating a genuine worldwide spiritual community. Jenkins had deliberately rejected the traditional entertainment industry's gatekeepers, choosing instead to trust ordinary believers with extraordinary vision. Grandmothers in rural Alabama funded scenes alongside tech entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley, while church youth groups organized bake sales to support production costs. This grassroots financing model generated not just monetary support but emotional investment that transcended typical audience engagement. The series became accessible everywhere, free on the Chosen app, available on major streaming platforms, and distributed through community screenings in churches, schools, and even prisons. Jenkins ensured that economic barriers never prevented anyone from encountering this retelling of Christ's story. "We wanted The Chosen to be a gift," he explained, "something that anyone, anywhere could experience, regardless of their financial circumstances." This accessibility proved prophetic as the series reached communities traditional Hollywood would never consider profitable. Villages in rural India gathered around shared smartphones to watch dubbed episodes, while Brazilian favela residents organized viewing parties that became impromptu worship services. In refugee camps across Syria, displaced families found hope through Jonathan Roumie's portrayal of a savior who understood displacement and persecution. As The Chosen approaches its final seasons, Roumie faces the physical and emotional demands of portraying Jesus' crucifixion. The actor has been training intensively, his frame noticeably leaner as he prepares for what he calls the most challenging thing I've ever attempted. The weight of representing Christ's ultimate sacrifice on screen requires preparation that extends far beyond physical conditioning. It demands spiritual readiness for an experience that will test every aspect of his faith. If these insights resonate with you, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. Your super thanks support helps us create more content like this. Join our community and stay connected. The series that began with Dallas Jenkins sweeping floors and Jonathan Roumie surrendering in a cramped apartment has become something neither man could have envisioned. It stands as evidence that when human ambition yields to divine purpose, the results transcend entertainment to become transformation. As 1 Corinthians 3:6 reminds us, "I planted the seed, Apollos watered it, but God has been making it grow." In The Chosen, millions worldwide have witnessed not just exceptional storytelling, but the mysterious ways that heaven intersects with earth when surrendered hearts become willing vessels for eternal truth.